This is Madam Speaker, and tonight we ask, can we exercise racism in South Africa? I'm going to throw my first question for our jury to Professor Melissa Steyn. We've had many incidents. The most recent, I suppose, we can talk about the controversy thrown up at the primary school in the Northwest Schweizer Reinecker, the Vicky Momberg case, and possibly endless personal accounts that are undocumented. Despite the promise of democracy, despite the calls for transformation workshops, for example, what does your work tell us about the DNA of racism in South Africa?
Well, I suppose the simple answer to that is that it is part of the DNA of South Africa, that it's not as if one can think of having like we've got a normal society with like a layer of racism that's somehow been laminated on top of it, and we're just going to be able to loosen this up and throw it away. But that the entire system, when we're thinking about knowledge production, when we're thinking about the economy, when we're thinking about education, when we think about the way the economy functions, everything has been structured through racial thinking and racialized and racist thinking. So this is not something, it's taken a lot of work.
So when you hear Ernst Roots, and perhaps there'll be a lot of people who might use that same word, oh, there's a feeling of entitlement in South Africa. What are the common responses to that ideology?
Well, the thing is that I don't want to say anything perhaps that would be taken as being too harsh, perhaps. But the thing about a racist imagination is that it turns reality upside down. So you get the blaming the victim type of logic. So what we really have to ask is who in South Africa has been entitled? Who in South Africa is feeling is feeling angry about perhaps losing entitlement? We can see that it isn't black South Africans who have the sense of entitlement. There's a loss of a feeling of entitlement to be able to do exactly as you like, to have all you want, to be able to speak to people as you like. That's the loss of entitlement that white South Africans experience.
Loveday, what the debate often pivots around is a question around, who can be racist, who can wear the title and who can't, and whether black people can be racist. And you heard Ernst talk to that point a little earlier. Your thoughts?
So I think part of the challenge in South Africa is that we don't have racial literacy. We don't understand what race is. We don't understand why race is. We don't understand how race is used to further inequality and oppression. In the context of South Africa, we need to understand that race was invented and created for and by white people to further and facilitate colonial conquest and oppression. If we don't understand the history of how race came to be, it's very easy to assume that you can individualize race, right? You can have good intentions as a white person, be the sweetest, teacher or the sweetest heart on earth. But the history that you come with that entitles you to live in a suburb while masses of black South Africans live in a township near you, the entitlement that your domestic worker must be a person of color, that shows you what racism is. It might not be intentional, but it exists in the system. And it's that racial literacy that's missing in our conversations. And that's why people will say, oh, no, there's black racists. When actually, no, black people don't have the institutional power to demand certain things. It actually all sits on white people. White people have been the ones that have been entitled for 400 years.
Gabriel, your thoughts on that?
I think that's a pretty sad idea. The way that power is organized, at least legitimate power in South Africa, is by the ballot. All South Africans can vote. The police are the powerful. The army are the powerful.
No.
Generally speaking, there's a lot of sort of pessimism or fatalism, really, that I'm hearing. And a short little story from China, the country with the longest history, the longest ongoing history in the world.
What?
A story that comes from probably the leading philosopher of race, Kwame Anthony Appiah. About 100 years ago, it was common practice still for Chinese women to bind their children's feet. That means breaking a little girl's foot repeatedly for a decade or so, or more, in order to achieve a kind of good look. It's a terrible and cruel and vicious thing.
We've got to accelerate to the point, though,
There's no law that made people do it. There's no religion that made people do it. It was a universal practice. And in 20 years, it completely stopped. Why? Because people changed their minds. They change their code of morality and of thinking. Change is
so racism
radical change is possible across a massive scale.
But racism is a mindset thing, then.
That was a mindset thing too. Those women were brutalizing their daughters because they had a mindset according to which women are not allowed to walk if they're to have high status. Women are not allowed to be independent if they're to have a high status.
Let's take a breath there, Gabriel, so we can bring the other panelists in. Busisiwe?
I think racism, let me just put it this way, a South Africa free of racism is something that is possible. Yeah. It's something that we can envision. But it will take a lot of hard work. It will take mobilization. So I look at it like HIV. 20 years ago, you didn't think that we would be where we are today. But you had mass mobilization, you had people being educated, you had dialogue taking place, you had medication being there and being made available for people there. And I think the same thing is needed when it comes to racism. We need to have these discussions. We can't shy away from them. We need to agree to disagree on some points, but there are commonalities across the race groups because all of us want to live in this free, equal society.
You're shaking your head, Loveland. Quick one.
So I think it's important for us to understand what power is. Power is not limited to the vote, okay? Power is economic, power is social, power is beliefs, it is norms, it is what is normalized in our society. We have to ask questions. Why are 1 in 5 black women in South Africa domestic workers? How did that happen? Why do we have 60 to 70% of black people living in townships when black people make up upwards of 80% of the South African population? That is not because someone sat down and felt a certain way about black people. It was about a collective agreement in the system that we will treat a group of people in this way.
All I was disagreeing with you was that you said no black people have power. And Soraya,
No. I said black people don't have institutional power to oppress white people.
The institution of the presidency. Is held by a black man. The institution of a constitutional court
and yet
is
the economy is not in black hands.
Let's take a breath there, guys. Let's take a breath there. I want to perhaps put a follow-up to you, Ernst, based on what some of our panelists are saying, insofar as the history of our country is concerned. I mean, is there room and space in the dialogue that you have with the constituency that you represent, which recognizes and understands that the history of our country was built on the suffering of black people?
Well, surely, and we need to have those discussions, and we as AfriForum do. We have those discussions internally about the history of this country. And
just give me a quick snapshot.
A snapshot of what?
Those discussions.
Well, what exactly are the criticisms against apartheid that are valid and that we should portray, that we should also say to people, listen, this was wrong, and we should never do that again.
Wait, which parts were valid?
The problem, let me explain to you why I'm framing it like that, because we have a master narrative in South Africa. The master narrative is white people came here, they did evil things, whites are oppressors and blacks are victims. And there's a very strong element of truth in that. But there's also different stories in South Africa that would counter that narrative. And let me give you an example. Currently, well, let me give you 2 examples. I was reading...
Just one hot one.
Okay, then I'll give you the current one. There were studies done about problems in terms of black education currently in South Africa. What are the main reasons why black schools are failing? And none of them have anything to do with white racism. It's teacher absenteeism, it's mismanagement by headmasters, it's lack of...
Again, that's to decide that the timeline of... That's to decide that the timeline of our history in our country.
Okay, well, can I give you the other example then? It's from
Tessa, let's bring you in.
The thing to remember is that South Africans might be black, might be the majority of the country, but white is the cultural narrative of our country. Our country and our institutions, the way we do things, even our political system, our judiciary, the ballot, all of these things are constructions that come from whiteness and its history. Yes. So you cannot just say, okay, because now you have all conformed to the institutions that we have put in place, now everybody has got power. No,
so
that
voting
power
is a white thing.
Oh, absolutely, because voting has a history that's rooted in whiteness, in Europeanness, in all sorts of things.
Do you vote?
I do vote.
But isn't that an expression of whiteness then?
No, it's not an expression of whiteness. It's me utilizing what is there to do as much as I possibly can to push against systems.
So you're voting in order to end the vote, to end whiteness.
I didn't say I'm voting to end the vote.
But you come across
I am voting to push against any kind of power that I can, and to utilize any kind of power that I can.
That's
but I recognize my own privilege.
I'm going to hold it
to do that.
I'm going to hold it on that. I'm going to hold it on that point. When we continue with Madam Speaker, we'll get the closing remarks from all of my guests. Stay with us.